God! I told you you'd never forget this game. You will never forget this game. We don't have to talk about how tough we are. We don't have to talk about how resilient we are. We live it, man. We've been living it. Where's our defense at? Offense, that's the way to step up, man. That's the way to step up. There you go, Skip. Keep throwing up, whatever you're doing out there. That's the way to freaking land on the line. Guys, I'm so freaking proud of you, man. That's the way to show up. You talk about pressure, we live in pressure. That's where we freaking thrive. You did it again. You did it again.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Happy Friday. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Of course, that was Dan Campbell at the top. Man, does he have the Lions humming right now. Incredible energy after a Thursday Night Football win.
Fired up. I wish Matthew Berry gave us those kind of speeches before
really
the show.
Galvanize us.
Yeah, instead he just orders people to get him chicken tenders and doesn't congratulate the offense or defense. Yeah, disappointing.
It was awesome from the Lions. One of the better Thursday night games it feels like we've had, not even just this year, but in quite some time. And I mean, you could see it in Dan Campbell. Just the energy around that program is the start of the video is just unbelievable.
That was the best win that he's had there. I think if we're not counting the playoff game against the Rams, these people on defense, they're not even on the team. The way that they're cobbling this together.
Basically practice squad guys littered with the amount of injuries they have. Shout out to Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, who will be a head coach after this year. A full Ben Johnson game. We're going to get through all the players. Denny Carter is going to be joining us, of course, to tell us what the mainstream media is refusing to tell us. And Denny's going to hang around as we go through the top games of the weekend with the highest point totals. And, of course, we will end the show with our pickup lines, our best bets going into the weekend. But with that, let's jump into the Roto World player news to break down the Thursday Night Football, the Lions' huge division win over the Packers. Jared Goff completes 32 of 41 pass attempts, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, and, of course, the interception as well. Got to hear from Goff after the game on the record that they tied. Detroit tied an NFL record with 6 players with 5+ receptions in a game. The only other 2 times that's been done is 2009 in Seattle, 2011 with the Browns. Take a listen.
We have a lot of guys we can throw to, and we got 3 tight ends I feel comfortable throwing to. We got 3 or 4 or 5 receivers when all healthy that I feel comfortable throwing to. 2 running backs, which is rare, that I feel comfortable throwing to. And it was a good day today to spread that ball around. And again, we knew we were going to be a little bit aggressive offensively, and it worked out.
As you look at the board here, the Lions receiving leaders kick off week 14. Jamison Williams gets 8 targets, goes 5 for 80. Shout out to Lawrence Jackson, who gave out the plus money receiving yards bet yesterday. The other noteworthy one to me here, Jay, is Tim Patrick, who catches 6 of 7 targets, 43 yards, more importantly, the 2 touchdowns. Shout out to you that had his receiving prop, I believe, at 24.5. He almost doubles that. Tim Patrick, what a story. All the time, all the years he's missed with injury, the 2 touchdowns. That's why Tim Patrick drinks for free today. Shout out to his return.
Well done, Tim Patrick.
He got a game ball after the game.
Yeah.
He's just a severely underappreciated player. It was a bit surprising when the Broncos just kind of dumped him.
Yeah, and it's worked out okay for the Broncos,
for
I guess,
sides,
but they could certainly use a player of his skill set at the moment. Like, he had a really solid year in Denver a few years ago, and then he's been dealing with injuries. It was over 1,000 days since he scored a touchdown in the NFL, and he is now he's an important part of this offense with Khalif Raymond on IR. He's the clear wide receiver 3, but I think that previous graphic just speaks to this idea that this is a very equal opportunity offense. There is no, we're just going to feed Amon-Ra St. Brown the way that Jamar Chase gets fed by Joe Burrow. It's just whoever is open. They have so many different weapons. And to me, the thing that stood out the most in a way is that David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, they kind of didn't do that much on the ground. They're averaging sub 4 yards per carry, and they still both have really good days because of the work they do through the air.
That's the beauty of it, is that while it could be a little hard to figure out who's going to get volume, because honestly, nobody will get all of the volume, it's efficient. That's the thing with Ben Johnson in this offense. Talk about Jamison Williams getting the 80 yards. Lawrence highlighted just the target share that he's had, not only recently, but more specifically what he's been able to do at home. And then, of course, our guys, Sonic and Knuckles, big Sonic and Knuckles fans on this desk, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Of course, Gibbs is a guy that gets 6 catches and 30 yards and a touchdown, does a lot of damage through the air. Montgomery also catches 5 passes in this game on some checkdowns, but gets in the end zone. So even without them having massive nights, Jay, like you said, they both each go over 19 fantasy points. They are locked in your lineups week after week.
Yeah, these guys are monsters, despite Matthew's loathing of their perfectly fine nicknames in Sonic and Knuckles. I think the two guys who suffer the most in this offense, at least relative to expectations, are Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta, who have been fine. Amon-Ra certainly has been fine, but hasn't lived up. There was a chance preseason that Amon-Ra could be the number one wide receiver in fantasy. He hasn't really sniffed that because of how diversified this offense is. Sam Laporta, signs of life. He's still an excellent excellent tight end, but there's just too many dudes in this offense at the moment.
Yeah, and things are turning right for Sam Laporta. 10.5 points per game since week 6. It was under 7 points per game through week 4, so at least things are getting better. Season high in targets, 4th game this season with 50-plus receiving yards. Jared Goff said just how much he trusts his tight ends. And then how about Jameson Williams, though, just to revisit this one, Jay, because it feels like they love the big playability with him on the field, and it feels like there's just so much open space for him and Tim Patrick because of the attention that both Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown command and the run game commands.
Yep, he does have a unique role in the offense where he is the deep guy. Jared Goff has confidence throwing deep to Jameson Williams every week, though. Like, he is very high variance. Like, there are going to be weeks where he puts up 27 yards and doesn't do a great deal, and then there's other weeks where he's going to totally explode. So, he's developing into his role, but I think that he is another guy who, like, if he was on a different team, there would be a chance he'd be a wide receiver too and would be a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy. But on this team, there's just such a wealth of options.
So as we get near the fantasy playoffs, the Lions have the Bills next week, the Bears, Niners, Minnesota. Let's stay in the more short term and talk about the matchup with the Bills. That the point total should be really high just because of how potent these offenses are. Is there a world on a deeper roster that you can argue starting Tim Patrick in your flex going forward, or is that just too touchdown risky?
I mean, I think in deeper leagues there is the opportunity just because Khalif Raymond is on IR, because he is the wide receiver 3 in a super high octane offense, and because just his profile as a player, I do think it lends itself well to red zone targets, just with his size, with his understanding of space. And I think the good thing for all of these Detroit players from a fantasy perspective is that the defense is just done. Like, the defense, they're out of human beings to throw out.
Campbell knows it.
Yeah.
Like, he said after the game, like, our offense had to win this game. And it was no shot at his defensive staff. It's literally a bodies thing.
Yep, and the thing there too is that, so the 4th down call has gotten a lot of scrutiny, and the fact that Jared Goff fell over on the handoff certainly kind of, I think that was the perfect embodiment of that play, where I don't think that most people thought he was crazy, and the fact that he converted it with his quarterback falling over was kind of, it was very symbolic that happened and it went down like that. But I think it speaks to the idea that, he knew when you make those decisions, you have to be aware of how strong your defense is or not. Like, if you have a top 2 defense in the NFL, then maybe you kick the field goal there, but he knows that he just doesn't have the body. He doesn't have the bodies right now, and giving 40 seconds to Jordan Love was very possibly going to lead to a tying field goal.
Especially how that game turned in the second half, where it was a slow start in this one for Green Bay, but things got rolling in the second half. A lot of that aided by the interception as well. But on the Green Bay side of things, the most noteworthy fantasy aspect, we start with Josh Jacobs. He gets the volume, 18 carries. I believe his rush attempts was set at 17.5, by the way. So he goes right over that for 66 yards. But most importantly, Jay, why he has almost 25 fantasy points, he falls into the end zone 3 times. They're just going to hammer him into the end zone when they get to the goal line. Yeah,
and that's the way that they want to play. They want to run the ball in when they get into the red zone. And I don't know about you, Connor, but as someone who was watching the game closely and had a bet on Packers plus 3.5, just watching that first half in particular, kind of got the sense that Matt LaFleur doesn't entirely trust Jordan Love in these types of situations, and he wants just the more conservatism, the surer thing of Josh Jacobs running it in.
It felt that way, and also it's tough. You start to lose faith in the bigger play guys when Christian Watson has that fumble.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we hit the big play, and then he's trying to do a little bit too much after the catch, and we lose the ball anyway. So I agree with you. It's not even just a Jordan Love thing. It might just be in the offense as a whole. And also, quite frankly, probably trying to keep the ball away from the Lions because of just, once again, how potent they are and how diverse they are on offense. And back to the Packers pass game that you brought up, Jayden Reed. I mean, we mentioned his receiving prop was over 60 yards in this game after it launched in the 40s. Some of the injury reports aided that. A goose egg, held without a catch on 1 target. He's been the poster boy. He's been under 10 fantasy points in 5 of his past 7 games, but besides that, he's been the poster boy of it's so difficult to figure out the distribution in this pass game for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because at the start of the season, we were talking about Jayden Reed as the next Deebo Samuel, and that was his type of player profile. Well, the actual Deebo Samuel and the next Deebo Samuel have both been on milk cartons for 2 months.
Right.
They've really failed to live up to expectations. I think with Jayden Reed, again, this is a team that really what Matt LaFleur wants to do is he wants to run the ball and he wants to throw it deep. And the deep guy is more Christian Watson, and they're running the ball with Jacobs. And so Jayden Reed, I mean, a lot of his value has come from actually these deep routes out of the slot, and he's feasted on big plays earlier in the season, but if they're not there, then he becomes a bit of an underwhelming option. I still think most weeks you have to start Jayden Reed because of the talent, but at the same time, it's been disappointing. Usually playing in the slot as well gives you more stability.
Right.
It usually raises your floor, but the way the Packers play, that just isn't there.
Yeah, he was wiped out in this game, and your man Tucker Kraft actually ends up with the big target share. Back-to-back weeks with a 25% target share. He's caught 3 of 5 for 41 yards. Most importantly, Jay gets the touchdown. It feels like in the red area, which the Packers have had some ups and downs in the red this year, it feels like the pass game goes to Tucker Kraft, and the run game, which is the favorite, betting favorite by far when they're in the red zone, is Josh Jacobs, and that's really it.
Yeah, I feel like Tucker Kraft kind of introduced himself to America last night with springing up off the ground after he took the big hit, catches the sick touchdown from Jordan Love, where Jordan Love absolutely ripped it. It's funny, with both of the quarterbacks, it was kind of like it was defining games for both of them, how they play, where Goff, very solid, hitting the open man, throws an inexplicable interception, and then Jordan Love goes through periods of being very shaky, and then goes through periods where it's like, is this guy going to be a two-time MVP at some point in the league? Like, he's got all of the talent, and Tucker Kraft, he benefited on that touchdown, clearly.
All right, that's it for Packers-Lions, which was just an awesome game, a very fantasy-relevant game, but even better so, a better NFL game. It's Friday, so as we always do on Friday, we welcome our friend Denny Carter on the show to tell us what the mainstream media is refusing to.
Doug Peterson was going to be fired. People don't realize he actually was fired. Doug Peterson was fired. So you may be asking, then how is he still coaching the Jacksonville Jaguars? It's because, Denny, he's using our third foolproof method to save your job. What is it?
Show up. Show up. You get fired, you show up. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's not even that hard. Just keep showing up to work, okay? If you have that grind set, if you're really going to put forth an effort, once you get fired, you simply just keep going to work, okay? And that's what Doug Peterson has done here. It's incredible to watch. Honestly, I would say, Pat, I'm inspired. You know, I was fired from Galaxy Brains 8 weeks ago. I keep coming, and you keep recording with me for some reason. And that's what Doug Peterson is doing for Jacksonville.
What the mainstream media doesn't want you to know, but before we get there, a very festive Denny Carter, I'd love to hear your thoughts on last night's game, especially as I would say you're a keeper of the analytics. What did you think of some of Dan Campbell's decision-making?
I've been known to dabble in, analytics promotion online, and Dan Campbell is our analytics king, okay? He remains so. But I have to say, I didn't love the fact that he actually went against the analytics in not kicking the field goal on 4th and inches last night against the Packers. He would have added about 3% to the Lions' win probability if he had kicked that field goal instead of gone for it. So I take no pleasure in saying our guy Dan went against the analytics on that call. It's strange to say.
Yeah, I will say, I think there's this idea that, Dan Campbell, he has a booklet that has all the percentages of everything. I think he just opens a booklet and it just says the word destiny in full caps.
Absolutely.
And he's like, all right, well, destiny again. I guess we're going to go for it again. I think a lot of the time with these 4th down calls, it's not so much the decision, it's the play call, which is deserving of criticism. Like, yeah, on the one that they go for in their own territory, why are you throwing it 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage on a fullback crack? It's like the famous one that started all of this was Belichick going for the 4th and 2 in 2009 in Indianapolis with Brady. It's like, it wasn't the wrong call to go for the 4th and 2. It was the wrong call on 4th and 2 to throw a 1-yard pass to Kevin Falk, short of the sticks. And so I think that with Campbell, the real crazy one was with him was last year in Dallas when he went for the 2-point from the 7-yard line after they take the penalty. That was insane. With this one, I think it's borderline. I think that the reason why I was okay with it, one, Dan Campbell, just go full Dan Campbell, who cares? The other reason is just that the defense is so banged up and you know that you can effectively win the game by getting a yard. And when you're Dan Campbell, you're never going to turn that down.
That's right. And listen, I'm all for Dan being the face of analytics. We need us nerds. We need a big, strong dude saying, "Hey, we're gonna follow the math." I love that. Don't get me wrong.
All right, Denny, who do you got for us this week? Who are the networks just burying? They're putting behind paywalls. I mean, what is going on here?
Yeah, exactly. That's right, Connor. Listen, Chris Hayes had a whole segment this week on Tommy Tremble. Well, guess what? Jatavian Sanders is back, Chris. I don't know if you check Roto World lately. You should. Jatavian Sanders suffered a neck injury a couple weeks ago for the Panthers. He should be back in action this week against the Eagles in what should be a very pass-heavy script, with the Panthers trailing throughout this game against a great Eagles defense, don't get me wrong. But before his injury, Jatavian Sanders had 87 yards on 4 catches in Week 9. A couple weeks later, he had 3 catches for 49 yards before halftime against the Chiefs. Then he suffered the neck injury. I think he was ramping up to be a significant part of this Carolina passing attack, and he should be out there and running a good route rate against Philadelphia. You could do worse, Chris Hayes. You don't talk about Tommy Tremble on air. Come on.
Jay, it feels like a game we've talked about where, the spread is hovering around 12.5 points in favor of Philadelphia. You would think the Panthers will be in a pass script chasing points, and Sanders is a very, his game as a tight end is pass catching first, second, and third.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing, and this is a strange thing to say about Bryce Young, but mobile quarterbacks are more immune to great defenses because they can create more outside of structure when players are perfectly covered. That doesn't mean game over. And so Bryce Young, what he has shown since he's come back as a new reinvented player who's rediscovered his confidence is that he can create outside of structure. He can avoid pressure and avoid those turning into sacks. So I think that just with the game script, with what Bryce Young has shown, Sanders is much more interesting than he would have been a few weeks ago.
Denny, up in Buffalo, there's a lot of coverage on Josh Allen's MVP campaign, James Cook being a touchdown merchant, some would say, but nobody's talking about the rookie and Ray Davis. Enlighten us.
That's right. Look, Ray Davis is getting action in this Buffalo backfield. I know the Bills have been pass heavy over the past 4 to 6 weeks, but I do think that they want to be a run first team overall, and they could have a chance this week against the Rams. The Rams have kind of snuck up on us. By us, I mean spreadsheet warriors, as a definite run funnel defense, and that's what we have here. I think the Bills should be pretty run heavy here, should have game script on their side. Ray Davis over the past 2 games, 16 rushing attempts to only 23 for James Cook. So I could definitely see Ray Davis getting 10 touches here. And his explosiveness, you never know, he could get a touchdown. So with 6 teams on bye, and everybody knows this, the bye apocalypse is back for some reason, and it's worse than ever. I think you can plug him in if you're a desperate running back. And let me tell you guys, I'm desperate at running back.
Yeah, I think the thing too is that the Rams' run defense, it had turned the corner slightly, but that was going up against bad running backs and bad rushing offenses. And then they played Saquon Barkley on Sunday Night Football, and he went for literally over 300 yards. So I think this Bills offense, as a way to, the one good thing that the Rams defense does is get pressure. Yeah. With the season that Jared Verse is having, and that defensive line has been better than expected in the absence of Aaron Donald. But one way to mitigate that is just by running straight into it. And Ray Davis, I suspect, will have a role this weekend.
Our last one here, Denny, Aidan O'Connell. For those of us, and all 3 of us do, play in the league of assholes here. You're probably desperate for a second quarterback during an awful stretch of players on a bye, as it wouldn't get in for some people. Some people it's seeding. Aidan O'Connell against the Bucs, which has been one of the worst secondaries in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good matchup for him. I will say, I believe my playoff chances are done in that league. My team is called the Analytics. The Analytics have failed, unfortunately, for the first time in that league. Don't tell Dan Campbell, please. But yeah, Aidan O'Connell, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns last week against Kansas City. The Raiders weren't super pass heavy as far as, pass rate over expected, other nerdy things. But yeah, I think that they will be in this game because, again, we have a pass funnel defense, one of the most extreme pass funnels in the league in Tampa. The Bucs are allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. This game has a 46-point total, which is the 4th most of the week. I think it has nice shootout potential here.
I think if Aidan O'Connell keeps playing well as he did against Kansas City, I think at some point the mustache has to go. Like, even just looking at it on the graphic now, having seen it up a few yards away from me at the Super Bowl when we interviewed him on Radio Row, it is very, very jarring. But whatever works for him.
Look, I'm all for, facial hair if you want it, but maybe just wait 3 or 4 more years. Wait till it gets a little coarser there, Aidan, and then grow the mustache.
It's unbelievable. What is also unbelievable is how good Brock Bowers is. And I think the thing with Aidan O'Connell is that he has figured out the cheat code to the Raiders offense, which is just throw it to Brock Bowers, where he seems to have the connection with Bowers. Bowers has had great games with AOC at quarterback. Bowers is set at over 70.5 receiving yards on DraftKings, which is crazy for a tight end. The only guy who really gets that territory in the past couple of years has really just been Travis Kelce beyond that. So I think that Aidan O'Connell should be able to put up numbers in a very favorable matchup.
Is there anything he could do to make a claim for Offensive Rookie of the Year, or is it just too quarterback heavy with Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix? Because the gap is, the beginning of the week, Brock Bowers was 10-1.
Yep.
Bo Nix was right around plus 185,
Yep.
and Jayden Daniels was obviously a minus favorite.
Yeah, so I actually think Brock Bowers is just as likely as Bo Nix to win, because it's kind of like if you want to beat the best swordsman, you don't want to be the second best swordsman, you want to be the most unconventional, and Bowers is unconventional as a case, whereas I don't think anyone thinks Bo Nix is better than Jayden Daniels, right? So I think with Bowers, it's not so much anything that he can do, it's more just what people want to make the award. Like if it's most valuable rookie, then it's Jayden Daniels. If it's most outstanding rookie, then there's a chance that relative to position that Brock Bowers is the guy. Like Brock Bowers might finish top 4 in the NFL in receiving yards, break the all-time rookie receptions record. Like he is having a historic season. Look, I've bet more on Brock Bowers than Jayden Daniels, so I'd very much like him to win, but I think Jayden Daniels probably deserves to win.
Denny, after crunching the numbers, is Brock Bowers going to be a first-round pick next year in redraft?
He absolutely will be. It could, because he's giving you wide receiver production at the tight end spot, right? Now, do I think that that's smart? Do I think that I'm going to be doing that? I don't think so. Generally, making that bet, like taking a tight end in the first round, has been a little bit dicey for fantasy purposes. We saw it back in the day with Jimmy Graham and Gronk, and then a little bit with Travis Kelce. But yeah, I could see him going in the top 12 picks for sure.
All right, guys, let's get into the Week 14 injuries that we're tracking as we show the list here. Breece Hall is at the top. 2 big running back names at the top. Breece Hall with the knee injury, Kenneth Walker with an ankle. Both did not practice Thursday. Bucky Irving dealing with a hip injury. He hasn't practiced. Mike Evans, who typically has been dealing with a hamstring injury much of this year, just keep an eye on that one going into the weekend. Jamar Chase with an ankle, CeeDee Lamb with a shoulder injury. Malik Neighbors has been dealing with that groin injury for a large part of the season, but playing even when it shows up on the injury report. Ladd McConkey has been limited all week with the knee injury. He did not return to the game when he came out against Atlanta, so as much as he's been limited this week, keep an eye on it because there's not a lot of clarity around how significant that one is. DK Metcalf with the shoulder, DJ Moore with the quad. And guys, we'll start with Breece Hall, Jay. Not spotted at Thursday's practice. He missed practices last week. Feels like this knee injury is not getting any better, and you just have to wonder at what point do the Jets shut it down.
Well, what's the point in playing him?
Right.
Like, he's a big part of the future in theory. He doesn't look like the same explosive guy this year. He hasn't really entirely looked the same since he did the ACL against the Broncos back in his rookie season, so I don't really understand what the point is of having him out there if he's any chance of making anything worse.
Yeah, and I'll say this with Breece Hall. If you roster him and he's a big part of your playoff plans and you can't get Braylon Allen, pick up Isaiah Davis, because Isaiah Davis will be the pass-catching back. And once again, you don't want to start Isaiah Davis if Breece Hall doesn't play, but he'll be the pass-catching back in this offense, not Braylon Allen, who will get much of the volume. But, Denny, this is bad timing for people that drafted Breece Hall in the first round. They're expecting him to help them throughout the playoffs, and it's just one of those trends that's going the wrong direction.
It is. I saw some reports about a week ago that said that the Jets originally thought that Breece Hall would miss a couple games, and so he played through it last week. Didn't get the same snap share, definitely wasn't involved in the same way we're used to. I don't love you talking about Braylon Allen in this way, that he's only going to be an early down back, and I trust you because it's the Jets, obviously. But I've held on for dear life to Braylon Allen all season. Please, let this guy be something late in the season. But if he's not going to get the pass catching work, then Braylon Allen is going to be an RB3 probably at best, especially in this offense that is not creating the sort of game script that's conducive to running back production.
The glass half full with Brandon Allen, I'll say, is he's going to get all the goal line work typically, although Isaiah Davis stole a touchdown last week inexplicably. And Rodgers is such a check-down merchant right now, Jay, that if you're out there, you have a chance to catch the ball, no matter if you're Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis. He's just getting the ball out at a ridiculous rate that is handicapping the offense beyond 5 yards.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is that like the Jets, they're just not very good. So they're going to be throwing a lot, and so there will be a lot of these dump-off opportunities, you would think. What do you think happens, Connor? Do you think that we get to 3 weeks left in the season and the Jets are just resting everyone? Like Aaron Rodgers, is he going to be out there with 3 weeks to go when they're playing Buffalo?
I felt for a while I'd be shocked if Rodgers finishes this season.
Okay.
It just doesn't – I mean, once you're mathematically eliminated and he's been dealing with multiple lower body injuries, put Tyrod Taylor out there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just – there's no reason to play.
What percentage chance Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback week 1 next year for the New York Jets?
3%?
Really? Wow.
5%? Denny, am I crazy?
That seems high to me.
I was going to say, I almost felt like disingenuous saying
it's 0%. It's 0. There's no chance.
The only way.
I don't want this guy.
Here's the the only pathway is if the coaching search goes so poorly that you only get someone that wants Rodgers. Like Rex is back, and he's like, I can win with Rodgers, which that's not a good plan. I want to make this clear, but that's the only way this happens.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
who's the
1%.
So the quarterback's like Justin Fields or something?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Someone like Jameis Winston. Yeah,
Right.
Get him in there. Let him rip.
Right. Tyrod's money is all guaranteed next year, so he'll be there no matter what. I mean,
Did we not have enough of Jameis? Did we not kind of? I think the book kind of fully opened and closed on Jameis in that Thursday night game. It was so the game against the Broncos. It was so kind of definitive that that is exactly what Jameis is.
book's not closed with the Lord.
The Lord will never deliver him from pick sixes. That is his plight. That's what he was put on earth to do.
All right, guys, the next big running back on our injury list here, Bucky Irving dealing with a hip injury. He didn't practice on Thursday. Like we said, Mike Evans didn't either, but you feel more optimistic about Mike Evans. Denny, this would be a big blow Bucky Irving-wise because a lot of people picked him up hoping, hey, he's going to take over for Rachaad White one day. That's exactly what happened, and he's been incredibly productive.
He has. I mean, you're looking at an RB1, really, especially with the bye weeks. He's been one of the most efficient rushers in the NFL. He's even been efficient as a pass catcher, even though Bucky Irving and Rachaad White continue to split the route running, pass catching role out of that Tampa backfield. If he misses, he's got to practice Friday to have a chance, right? Even in a limited capacity. If Irving is out, Rachaad White becomes very interesting because he's going to get the entire route share. I can see the Bucs dropping back to pass quite a bit against, again, I'm going to say it again, pass funnel Raiders. And so that could mean White turns into just a great PPR scam in Week 14.
Some bit of hope here, guys. As we've been sitting here on the desk, both will practice today. Now, obviously, this could still be game time decision, especially on the Bucky Irving end. So keep an eye on it, but it sounds like both will get some kind of work in on Friday. Our last notable one here, Jay, is in Seattle. Kenneth Walker, ankle injury, calf injury, downgraded to did not practice for Thursday's practice. DK Metcalf was held out of Thursday's practice, but Kenneth Walker is at the point where recently it's not passing the eye test now, so it's very believable that he's hurt.
I think I'm just done in future years drafting Ken Walker.
It's the
This
same
just
story
happens.
every year.
He's constantly banged up. Even when he's playing through injuries. He's always on the injury report. It just feels like his body might just not be able to hold up. And so, look, if he is out there and if he's playing, you still have to start him because he's still the lead back in what is a very solid offense with an okay matchup against the Cardinals, who have a slightly below average defense. So I think with Ken Walker, it's just wait and see. If he is out there, he's going to get goal line carries, he's going to get work, but you just can't trust him week to week.
All right, guys, let's take a look at some of the top waiver ads. If you're dealing with a lot of these players on the injury report or you're still realizing, hey, I have too many guys on the bye week, these are some players that are available in at least 50% of leagues. Will Levis, Jacksonville has allowed 18-plus points to a quarterback in 8 of 12 games this season, so you need a desperate streamer at quarterback. Levis has the matchup. We talked about Jameis Winston with the volume, Jerome Ford. Zach Charbonnet, if he's somehow out there in your league, keep an eye on Kenneth Walker's status. Charbonnet also vultured a touchdown last week. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who just seemingly catches a touchdown every single week. Elijah Moore, MVS, who's having a renaissance, Jay. Parker Washington, who's taken over the slot for Jacksonville. Will Dissly. Goose egg last week, but better days ahead for Will Dissly and Juwan Johnson against what is ever left of your New York Giants.
Yeah, my New York Giants. Yes, the MVS Renaissance, very comparable to Da Vinci's back in the day.
Yes.
Hard to know who did it better. Some interesting names here. I think with Jerome Ford is an interesting one in particular because it felt like in that it was a Monday night game against the Broncos that maybe they were starting to turn a little bit on Nick Chubb and just realizing that he just doesn't seem right and he's not having that explosiveness, and he went through patches of the game where he just wasn't out there, and it seemed like Jerome Ford is probably just the better option now, and you hope that Chubb just gets back on track next season.
Denny, any of these names? Go ahead, Denny.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as the Browns offense goes, what does Jameis got to do to get picked up in some fantasy leagues, man? I mean, the guy throws for almost 500 yards. I mean, what do you want? This guy's dropping back 55 times a game. Like, okay, so what? He throws some pick sixes. Who cares? That's for fantasy. That's great. You know what I see? When I see a Jameis pick six and I have Jameis on my team, I say, oh, thank God. Because now we're going to get a whole drive of nothing but check downs to Njoku and Moore and Jeudy, and just going to rack up those points, right? It doesn't like you can't get caught up in like the real football aspect of Jameis if you're starting him in fantasy. He's a great option this week, even against a good Steelers defense.
Yeah. I think the funniest thing about him being asked to be delivered from pick sixes is like, no, Jameis, this is your destiny. It's like Steven Seagal asking to be delivered from action movies. Like, this is what you have to do. You're here on earth to throw these pick sixes.
He gets the ball back, and then he gets to potentially go 80 yards down the field. It's a great concept.
It's beautiful. I love it.
So how about somebody that we've joked about on the show? Now we're no longer joking, Denny. It's not funny anymore. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, or as Matthew calls him, NWI. Literally nobody else in the world does that. I mean, the joke was he just catches a touchdown and moves on with his day. But he's got at least a 20% target share now in 4 of his past 5 games. He's a real thing for Will Levis.
Yeah, I know.
Reluctantly, I know. It's not the best.
The NWI thing. I'll call him NWI, whatever. I will
We're not
say,
encouraging it.
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. No, I know. I gotta keep it rolling for Matthew though. He is a regression files staple at this point because he keeps getting away with it, right? He has like 4 touchdowns on his past 9 receptions or something. I mean, just insane sort of numbers that you really don't see that often. I mean, it's going to collapse at some point, and really like a 20% target share in a run first Titans offense, that's not a whole lot. What are we talking, like 5-6 targets a game? Now against the Jags, I guess he could keep it going because the Jags can't defend anything, including the pass, including especially downfield shots, right? So he's going to get away with it again, and we're going to be talking about him again next week. It's terrible.
The last name, Jay, I want to ask you about here. Will Dissly, a bit of an enigma going into this one. He has 0 fantasy points last week, but Kansas City gives up the most receptions and yards per game to tight ends.
The enigmatic Will Dissly, one of the great enigmas of our time. I think the thing is the Chiefs, they are now a clear pass funnel defense where their run D is very solid, and the pass D, since Jalen Watson has gone down, has just been catastrophic. They just have not been able to compensate for losing L'Jarius Sneed in the offseason and losing Jalen Watson to injury. And so in a game where the Chargers are 4-point dogs, expect that they will need to throw in this one. And with the uncertainty around Ladd McConkey, like there are very real worlds where Will Dissly in a favorable matchup is the number 1 option for Justin Herbert in a primetime game on NBC.
Denny, are you bold enough to start him?
Yeah.
Him or Juwan Johnson?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm starting him over Juwan Johnson. Listen, Dissly was a victim of low play volume for the Chargers last week. Herbert only had 29 dropbacks. The Falcons had the ball basically in the entire second half last week against LA. So, don't just disregard Dissly this week. If Ladd McConkey is out, honestly, Dissly's like, I don't want to say locked in, but pretty close to locked in for double-digit targets here. Because the one thing we know that the Chiefs defense does every week is they snuff out opposing rushing attacks. And with Gus Edwards leading the LA, backfield, no chance these guys establish the run. It's going to mean a bunch of dropbacks and a bunch of cheap targets for Dissly. It might not amount to much, but you don't care if you're plugging him in at tight end this week.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about this game is that I think you look at it face value, it's like Chiefs, Chargers, Sunday Night Football, Mahomes, Herbert. Like the total's 43. Like it's not expected to be a super explosive scoring game. And so in an ugly game, I think Will Dissly absolutely has, 6 for 59 and a touchdown in him.
We're going to take our first break. When we're back, we preview some of the biggest games coming up this weekend with what's on tap right after this.
Talk us through how you decided you wanted to buy a Batmobile.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Internet says it's not street legal.
Again, I don't know what you're talking about.
Why does it take a year?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Joe Burrow, not wanting to give away his alternate ego, his doppelganger life, whatever it may be that he wants.
Driving his non-street legal.
I mean, he knows he's wearing a mic the other day, right? Like it's.
Yeah, I know. He's so Denny, the Batmobile costs $3 million. It's not street legal. How much life savings would you need to spend $3 million on a Batmobile? Like, if you had $100 million, would 3 of it go to a Batmobile?
And you don't get it right away. You probably have to wait like a year,
months.
right? Yeah, to get it.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. But then again, I'm not 26 years old like Joe Burrow is. So maybe it's cool as a young guy, as a Zoomer. I don't know. I'm an elderly millennial, man. I don't have any interest in that. Also, the Batmobile, we have to remember, it blows up in every movie. Like it like every single time you see it. Yeah, you're like, oh, this is cool. Oh, and it explodes. So what is he gonna do then?
Yeah, I feel like it just creates a domino effect where now if you have a Batmobile but you don't have a Batcave, then what's the point? So now you're going to build a Batcave.
Well, that's what Jamar Chase and T. Higgins said. Like, now you got to get the suit. And he was kind of into that. But it just spirals out of control. Yeah. Compounds into more expenses.
I think Joe Burrow, his contract was like 5 for $275. So he's probably got money to throw around. But yeah, it's just
not street legal.
I just don't know what you do with it.
It's not street legal?
No, it's not street legal. You can't drive it.
Can you make it street legal?
No, I don't think
you can't put plates on it?
I'm not sure there are modifications that you can make to the Batmobile to just drive around downtown
There's
Cincinnati.
literally zero point of owning it if you can't drive it down the street. That's the whole point. Is he wants people looking at him driving the Batmobile, which is cool.
I guess you just put it in your driveway.
For somebody to steal.
Yeah,
which is why he probably doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right. What's on tap is brought to you by Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the NFL. Sundays are easy to enjoy when they're full of football and the fridge is filled with beer. These are the games we're locking in on as we show you some of the highest point totals here. We're going to start with the Bengals, who are 5.5-point favorites, led by Batman himself, against the Cowboys. They're at Dallas. The over-under is 49.5. Here are the fantasy notable players here. Denny, I pose this question to you. Are you starting any Dallas Cowboys besides CeeDee Lamb and Rico Dowdle this week?
Dowdle is in a good spot. I just want folks to know. We talked about him on the Roto World Football Show yesterday on Thursday, and he needs to be in lineups this week. But I guess Jake Ferguson. I mean, I actually would go with the aforementioned Will Dissly over Ferguson, just because I think the Cowboys are going to want to be run heavy and lay off the drop backs. Will they be able to? I guess that's another question entirely. But Ferguson is interesting. Beyond that, I don't know if I can trust Brandon Cooks as anything more than like a wide receiver 4 here.
Yeah. People don't actually realize this is a revenge game because Cooper Rush was outbid on the Batmobile by Joe Burrow, which is a tough break for Cooper Rush. Yeah, they told him he doesn't have enough money. I think this is an awesome matchup for Jake Ferguson. The Bengals are horrific against tight ends. We saw what Pat Fryermuth did, revitalizing his season by just eviscerating them last week. So very favorable matchup for Ferguson. It's strange, like the Cowboys, they seem like a mess, but at the same time, it's like, well, you've got these 3 guys in Dowdle, Lamb, and Ferguson who are all pretty startable. And then you have a defense as well that is playing a bit better. So I think this is going to be a more compelling matchup than certainly it looked like a couple of weeks ago when the Cowboys were spiraling.
At the rate the Bengals are scoring at, Jay, and the spread being 5.5, which is somewhat reasonable, it kind of tells you that it could force the Cowboys to get away from Denny's point. Like, this is a good spot for Rico Dowdle unless they have to throw a lot. 49.5 actually seems like a reasonable total that can go over.
Yeah, and I mean, if you work backwards from that, the line is 5.5. So the market is expecting that the average score in this game is going to be like 27-22, that type of range. And if the Cowboys score 22 points, like that's a pretty good outcome in terms of the potential value of Dowdle, Lamb, and Ferguson. So yeah, I think this is going to be a shootout.
All right. Our next game here, the Bills are 3.5-point favorites at the Rams. The over-under in this is also 49.5. Denny, we talk about this with the Packers a lot, and in a way it's happened with the Bills. Can you trust any pass catchers in this offense, especially against a defense that you highlighted earlier? They'll probably want to run against to the point where Ray Davis could be viable in this game.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, if I'm making a bet that Ray Davis will be viable, then along with that bet comes very low target volume for everybody else involved, including Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Amari Cooper, the rest of them. If Dalton Kincaid is back, I think he's a very shaky option here against LA. So the Rams play like a ton of too high, right? And they invite teams to run the ball. And I think the Bills will take that bait, okay? And we've seen the Bills go way under their expected pass rate in previous games, 6-8 weeks ago, they were doing it quite often. And in those games, you would have, one guy exceed 5 targets. And I think that's what we're going to have here. So I think you can start Shakir in PPR formats where there's like multiple flex spots, but I really would try to avoid these pass catchers for Buffalo.
Will be an interesting chess match because if the Rams are doing that and they're inviting the Bills to take the bait, but then the Bills are taking the bait for running for 6.5 yards a carry and 60% success rate, then I'm not sure really what the end game is there. But I think the most interesting guy of the Bills pass catchers, Connor, is Amari Cooper, who we thought would come in and revolutionize their passing game and give Josh Allen a true number 1. Now, it's been a little bit weird because he's been injured and there's a snow game and they just haven't really had to throw because they're really good and they're not in these throw scripts all the time. But do you think it's going to happen for Amari Cooper?
Well, he gets the touchdown in his debut, right? And we joked about it on the show, but really, like, not only half jokingly, it felt forced. It's like, get this guy going, and he looked great, and you're like, oh, this is going to work. The problem for me, Denny, is quite simply he's not on the field enough to earn enough targets to be fantasy viable. And until that changes, how could you even consider starting Amari Cooper, borderline rostering him right now? I mean, 53% route participation since he's got the Bills, which has led to an 11% target share. If you're not on the field, you're not going to get targets. And the Bills have so many different options in this offense. They're not forcing Amari Cooper on the field just because they traded for him. So, no, to answer your question, Jay, no, like if you've waited this long, it's probably hurting you significantly at this point.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes guys can get away with having a low route participation rate like Cooper has in Buffalo. Like DeAndre Hopkins, similar situation in Kansas City, but Hopkins is seeing a target on about 25% of his pass routes. So that sort of counteracts that situation. That's not the case with Amari Cooper. He's not a priority, I guess, for Josh Allen and this offense. And so even with 6 teams on bye, honestly, I feel like you could do better. Like I would say, just off the top of my head, a guy like Parker Washington seems like a better option than Amari Cooper this week.
And the last note on the Bills here, guys, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, since week 3, only 3 tight ends have had more than 45 receiving yards against the Rams. He's coming off injury. And honestly, as talented as Dalton Kincaid is, he wasn't that great in fantasy before he got hurt.
No, and he is in an offense that doesn't throw the ball a ton because they don't need to because the running game is so good and they've got such a favorable matchup. Like, where does he slot into the pecking order? Like Khalil Shakir. The issue is that Shakir is Allen's guy. Like, he seems to have the best rapport with Allen, and Shakir runs kind of like tight end type of route trees where he's taking the short stuff, he's taking the stuff over the middle of the field. So Dalton Kincaid, like if you drafted him and you have him on your team, you probably don't have a better option. But I mean, if you've been able to pick up like a Will Dissly off the waiver wire, Will Dissly to me is much more appealing than Kincaid this week.
Denny, for the Rams side of it, is there anything noteworthy to you besides the staples? Obviously, Puka and Kupp and Stafford and Kyron. Corm's getting a little bit more work, but it hasn't mattered. Demarcus Robinson is looking on the right track to be healthy again, but feels like a desperation play.
I guess if you think that the Rams are going to be playing from behind here and chasing points, then Demarcus Robinson comes into play just purely as a drop back volume driven option. But really, we know where the ball goes in this offense. It's to Puka, it's to Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp's in a great spot, by the way, against the Bills defense that allows a lot of short area reception. So it would seem to be a slightly Cooper Kupp week over Puka to me. But beyond that, you're hoping that Kyron Williams gets that touchdown. Otherwise, you don't have much because with the receivers back in the fold, he's not seeing much pass game involvement at all. I'm not too worried about Blake Corum's usage. It's like, midfield carries. Like, who cares about that? We just need that inside the 10 work from Kyron Williams, which I think we can get here.
Our last game, guys, is the Panthers at Eagles because the point total is up to 46. The Eagles are favored right now by 13 points in this game, Jay. Looking at their offense, this is a game where we think they'll be playing with a significant lead. We think they'll be able to lean on the run game to close it out. Do you start or sit DeVonta Smith in his first game back?
So I think with Dallas Goedert not going to play, the DeVonta Smith, he becomes much more viable. His performances when Goedert has been out have been great since 2022 in games that Goedert has missed, which has been 11 games where Smith has played. He averages almost 17 points per game and a 28% target share. Now, the issue that counteracts against that is that the Eagles are pushing up to being 13-point favorites. Saquon Barkley's rushing prop is inching towards 115, which is one of the highest of all time, or at least in recent history. So I think that this is going to be a game where they do run the ball, but if DeVonta Smith is out there, if he's healthy, then I think you feel okay starting him and expecting that he's going to be a low-end wide receiver too.
I have a rather depressing stat for folks who have rostered A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith. The Eagles this year, 35% pass rate when leading, okay, which is by far the lowest in the league. So when they grab a lead, it's over for these pass catchers. And against the Panthers, I feel like that's, a probability. Let's just say that kindly.
Denny, on the Panthers side of things, we've talked a lot this week about, the potential split incoming with Chuba and Jonathan Brooks getting more work. But on their pass-catching side of things, this is a game where you're scared of the Eagles' defense. The secondary has been much better thanks to the rookie additions of Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But you can argue they should be throwing because they'll be playing from behind. Where does that put Xavier Legette and Bryce's favorite target in Adam Thielen?
Yeah, I know. I think that they're in play. Again, 6 teams on bye, so that factors into it. But Legette and Thielen, and to a lesser extent, like the aforementioned Jatavian Sanders, Jalen Coker, maybe let's get crazy with some Jalen Coker. These guys are in play because I could see Bryce Young dropping back 40-plus times here. And, Bryce Young has been playing, Jay mentioned this, well enough, not fantastic, but well enough to provide production for more than one pass catcher, okay? So you can split up 250, 300 yards among 2 or 3 guys and have fantasy viable outings. But before this renaissance from Bryce Young, you had to split that up between 150 yards between 2 or 3 guys. So I do think that folks should not just like pull the cord on the Carolina pass catchers because they're taking on a tough Eagles defense.
Yep. I think one other thing too about specifically this game is that not all 13-point dogs are created equal in terms of being in a throw script and having the ball. Like it's different. It's worse for Bryce Young in terms of the throw script when he's going up against a team that has the best rushing attack in football because he's just not going to have the ball that much, I think. Even if they are down, like the Eagles could have 38 minutes time of possession in this game with how effectively they're going to run it. So, yeah, I think that these guys like Thielen and Sanders are definitely interesting, but Bryce Young, I suspect that he may just not have the ball a ton.
That's a good point.
That'll do it for What's on Tap, presented by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Sunday night, a divisional rivalry comes to a head as Justin Herbert and the Chargers face Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at Arrowhead Sunday, 7 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. We're taking our last break. When we're back, it's time for Last Call as we try to pick up Denny with our best bets for the weekend. Stick around.
So I like Jamison Williams, alt line, 60 receiving yards at plus 135. This game is 51.5. That's the highest of week 14. I expect some points to be scored here. I expect some back and forth, and I expect something out of Jamison Williams.
Tim Patrick, who was a great story, taking him over 24.5 receiving yards. Khalif Raymond on IR, so Tim Patrick now the clear number 3 wide receiver. He played 70% of the snaps last week. He's gone over in 3 straight.
Going with a kicker prop. Brandon McManus over 6.5 kicking points, 2 field goals and an extra point. Yeah. The Lions, they have a lot of injuries on defense, but I think they'll bear down on their own side of the field, forcing the Packers to take a couple field goal attempts. 3 for 3, take that, Mr. King. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins, just like all 3 of ours did. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. All right, it's time for Last Call. A little bit of different twist on pickup lines as we head into the weekend. Jay and I are going to pitch our best bets for Week 14 to Denny. What do you got, Jay?
Okay, well, Connor, in my youth, I dated a girl from Switzerland, so I'm used to long-distance relationships. So I'm okay with this situation with Denny a few hours down the road. Denny, what I have for you, my friend, my hopefully better than friend, Jerry Jeudy on DraftKings is set at 4.5 receptions.
What?
Did anyone watch Monday Night Football? The man had a million receptions. Since
going on?
Jameis Winston has become the quarterback, he's gone over every single game, 5 straight. He's averaging 7 receptions a game. He's averaging 10 targets a game. He did this against the Steelers a couple of weeks ago. Now, the over is -130, so there is a little bit of juice there. But still, I think this line is insane. Like, I'm not scared about any of the Pittsburgh corners. It's Jameis. Yeah. It's the Jameis show. We know that he's going to be throwing. They're 6.5-point dogs. This line is madness to me. I think Mr. King had too many vodka cranberries.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Connor to compete with that, I'll be honest.
Yeah, Denny, let me be honest. I will not be insulted in any way when you select that one because that's absolutely incredible. But I still have something good for you. Although it's a little bit more adventurous, and it will force you to watch a game that I don't know if you'll be very interested in. Drew Lock over 16.5 rushing yards. Drew Lock had 4 rush attempts on Thanksgiving for 57 yards. And listen, Drew Lock is playing for his next job next year. He's a madman. He doesn't care about taking off and running. The Giants' offensive line is dreadful. He will be forced to break the pocket a lot. I think that this is a pretty low number for him for a guy that, hey, if he gets 3 carries, he's going to fire right over this number. But I will say, still tough because this means you actually have to watch the Giants against the Saints if you take this one home.
I will absolutely not be doing that, of course. But yeah, I mean, look, Drew Vic Lock, you never know. You know, he could.
Drew Daniel Jones Lock.
Yeah, he'll easily go over this, but I have to. I'm sorry, I have to go with the Jeudy one because I mean I would take that over on Jeudy if it was like 7.5. You know, I mean 4.5. Like he could literally get that in the first quarter. So I'm sorry, Connor, but I have to go with Jay here.
I'm stunned. Stunned by the line.
I'm not insulted. That is truly the mainstream media is not talking about Jerry Jeudy.
No, they're not.
Clearly,
What is that?
It really makes you wonder here on this one.
I just don't get it at all. Sometimes you're scrolling through. It takes me a while. I saw that one. I was like, oh, done. This is my one.
Do you think it gets to 6.5 by Sunday?
Yeah, it may. I think it will.
And you probably still play it, like Denny said.
Yeah. I think the number should be 6.5. He's averaging 7 a game with Jameis.
All right, that wraps it up for us. Denny, thank you as always for joining us. Always great having you on.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
And the guys will be back with Fantasy Football pregame on Sunday. For Jay and Denny, I'm Connor. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com. And I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched. Or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.